I wanted to give a shout out to former NBA player Matthew Dellavedova, who played at St. Mary's. He won a championship with the Cavaliers. He's now playing in the Australian top league, the NBL, and he won the Finals MVP recently, and he actually called out his opponent, 𝘊𝘭𝘕𝘭𝘕, as more deserving of the honor and gave the award to him. And I couldn't help but think that that was exactly the same move that Tony Manero used at 2001 when he won the dance competition with his partner over the Latino couple. And Tony believed that it was actually only because the judges were racist or xenophobic or prejudiced, whatever term you want to use. And he actually went over and gave them the award. So the winner of my Tony Manero Good Sportsman Award goes to Matthew Dellavedova.
We have to name.
Welcome to Wait What? Sportsbiz Chat with DP and McGhee, the podcast where we take a sometimes cynical, sometimes irreverent, and yes, even a sometimes serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, Tim McGhee.
And I'm David Pitaro.
David, what do you have this afternoon?
Well, there's a couple things I really want to start off with. Obviously, we can talk about the first weekend of NCAA, both on the men's and women's side. I do also want to call out the fact that last week we were at Mets House at the invitation of the New York Mets. And then this week, Steve Cohen gets a cover story on SBJ. I don't think there's that many coincidences anymore. So I just thought I would flag that and say, we had a great time with the Mets at Mets House, and he's the talk of the town. That's the cover story on SBJ. So I just wanted to throw that out. I don't know. Listeners, you guys can determine whether or not, that's a coincidence.
And I saw that our friend and past guest Joe Favorito was doing his podcast from Mets House this week.
Well, yeah.
So I hope he appreciates the huge footsteps he's following.
He's probably wondering who was in here to mess up the whole setup before he got there. Yeah, no.
He's telling Adam Honig right now. He's asking, right. wait, we're following who?
Even though he was a past guest.
Yeah. But I know that.
Yeah. So we need to talk about the Celtics sales price. So the Boston Celtics sold recently for a record $6.1 billion. Now, we've seen the prices rise. This beats what the Commanders sold for to Harris Blitzer. And this certainly
by the way, own their own stadium.
Not own their own stadium, and it's an NFL team, because NFL always, you expect to get the premium prices. Beat significantly the Phoenix Suns deal that was a year or so ago. And while they don't own their arena, they have a very cash positive business relationship with that arena. The amazing thing about the Celtics deal is that not only do the Celtics not own the arena is owned by Delaware North, which is one of the big concession companies in with a lot of venues, or I guess it's officially Delaware North Boston. And the CEO of Delaware North is Jeremy Jacobs, who is the owner of the Bruins. And so this is truly an amazing thing. And obviously, I think that Commissioner Adam Silver and the rest of the owners have to be thrilled with his sales price. Because what else is going to happen, I suspect, this year is that we're going to hear more about expansion, and this is going to help drive up that entry fee for those expansion markets, being reported at possibly $7 billion now. So I think it's pretty incredible. I don't know sometimes where the money is coming from when you hear about these deals, but that's the deal.
The increase in the value of the sale from the Suns to the Celtics was about 33%, because the Suns sold for $4 billion. They also got the Phoenix Mercury with that too. Keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So and the Celtics lease, to your point, goes through 2036 at TD Gardens. So I don't know if there's any flexibility in that for the Celtics' new ownership to to renegotiate a more favorable deal that's more aligned with what the Suns have in Phoenix and what the 76ers ostensibly are going to get with Comcast Spectacor when they renegotiate that agreement in the Wells Fargo Center, soon to be Newco Center, when there's a new sponsor that comes on board next year. So yeah, it's crazy. It's what I call the bigger fool theory. Right. Several years ago, there was some talk that the media rights landscape was going to plateau. And what I said at the time was, there's always a bigger fool out there who's willing to overpay for an asset. And only time will tell whether this new ownership group has overpaid for the Celtics. But to your point, Adam Silver and the other owners are ecstatic. Particularly people like Jim Dolan in New York and Jeannie Buss and the Buss family in LA. The real storied franchises.
Well, I think we're going to have to take that up, the situation with Dolan, because as you know, Dolan is of late. I don't know if this will assuage any of that.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Or what?
What, Jim Dolan making waves, or is that?
No, the wage.
I got to throw something out.
That Wake Forest education paying dividends all these years later.
Smooth over. Make it easier to accept. He's been making a lot of waves. He's firing off a lot of letters to the Board of Governors at the NBA, and his beefs have been, like I said, I think we'll have to take this up probably on another podcast at some point as we hear. But he's a large market team owner, and they have a certain degree of revenue sharing, or they're getting more close to the NFL model all the time, it seems. And he also seems to have a beef about the level of spending that the league office does, and that you would think in terms of their special events areas and various other budgetary items. I'm not saying that Adam Silver is David Stern, but I think in his time as commissioner, the value of the franchises obviously have expanded incredibly, as evidenced by this Celtics sale. The new TV deal that's going to be going into place, I think, is a big win for the league. And the other challenge, of course, is the RSN situation, which they have had a very successful, profitable RSN, while in a lot of markets around the country on hockey and basketball, those RSNs haven't been as valuable. And a lot of people predict that they will be, their days are numbered in the advent of streaming and so forth.
I don't think it would be a stretch to say the Knicks could go for $8 billion. Yeah. Between the value of the franchise, MSG Networks, and the Garden. I don't envision Dolan selling anytime soon, and I don't envision him breaking up the Rangers and the Knicks and some of the other assets that they own. But he's got to be pretty happy with his estate planning situation.
Yeah, I would think. Listen, he could carve up that thing in so many ways and would have so many buyers lining up for each of the individual pieces: the Rangers, the Knicks, the Garden, MSG as an organization, the various other entities they have, the Sphere, et cetera, Radio City. It's an unbelievable organization that he runs. But at the same time, people that have that level of money oftentimes like to look under the hood quite a bit and want to make sure that they're getting treated well and getting the best bargain, right?
If he's not happy with how the league conducts business, he can go cry in a big bag of money.
Anyway, $6.1 billion to a team that not only doesn't own their venue, their arena, TD Garden, excuse me. I knew it was TD Garden, and don't have the naming rights to that. The difference in Phoenix is the Suns had the naming rights to that venue, and other differences. But yeah, no, unbelievable. What about you? What's top on your list?
Well, a couple of quick hits to get us started.
Quick hits. We're about to share some tidbits. Things that didn't make it on the main list. Doesn't mean we think they're not worth a
First of all, I read last week that Jimmy Pitaro, Cornell grad, by the way, an
really?
ATO brother.
I've never heard you say that before.
An ATO brother, Cornell, ever hear of it? Has taken himself out of contention for the CEO role at Disney. He didn't comment publicly on why he's taken himself out, but I've heard some thoughts. Number one, it's very difficult to be in that role because Bob Iger retired once and then came back. There's nothing to say he wouldn't do it again. Somebody likened it to, being the coach after Tom Landry or Bill Belichick. You don't want to be the guy who replaces the guy. You want to be the guy who replaces the guy who replaces the guy. Just give a little bit of distance from that. So, but I thought that was big news. Other news, quick hits, the USL, which recently got first division status from US Soccer, announced that they will be using a system of promotion and relegation. Virtually every other soccer league in the world, with the exception of Major League Soccer, uses this system of promotion and relegation where the bottom teams in the standings at the end of the season are relegated to the lower level, and the top finishers in the level below get promoted up until the next one. And in the case of the Premier League in particular, it makes a tremendous amount of difference in terms of the revenue that's coming in. And what I'm hearing is that within the soccer world, that's causing some concern here in America, because it is something that aligns with the rest of the world. And USL is taking a couple of shots now over the bow of Major League Soccer. I'm not suggesting that USL is going to usurp Major League Soccer anytime soon as the number one first division league in this country, but I think it's something we need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think when you talk to global soccer purists, they'll always talk about the greatness of the promotion and relegation system in global soccer leagues, all global soccer leagues outside of Major League Soccer, as a badge of honor, right? And wonder why it's not put into place here in the States in other sports, in football and in basketball and hockey and baseball, say. And the reality is that the ownership situation here is entrenched, and that's not going to change. I think the leagues do a reasonable job of trying to create parity, so there are chances for teams to come up, and we've seen that. We see that in every sport all the time. There's always going to be a surprise. Yes, certain teams can create dynasties over time as well. So it's not going to happen. I don't believe it's going to happen. And if I were an owner, I wouldn't want it to happen too. Does it create a proper meritocracy of what sports should be? Possibly. But at the same time, the teams, say, take Premier League, the teams in the top six or so, the big six, say, haven't. I guess there were early season fears of a couple of teams possibly being relegated this year. It didn't end up happening or won't end up happening, but there had been some fear of that. Yeah, I think it's I like the twist by USL, especially as they're trying to establish this league. So we'll see. Agree, it's an interesting kind of shot at them.
I've got so many other things to cover, but what else do you have?
I want to talk because we're now coming out of a great first week of NCAA. As you predicted quite definitively, you thought the numbers were going to be big. I concurred with that. And so far, from a viewership standpoint, they have been good, drawing best TV ratings in more than 3 decades. Even though there haven't been any real upsets, there haven't been, other than the St. John's one, which wasn't that big of an upset, by the way, because Arkansas is playing great.
Yeah, it was an upset to the extent that it was a number 10 seed. This poor young man, R.J. Lewis, who was the player of the year in the Big East, is getting death threats, but
Yeah.
Which I just think is absolutely
From
absurd
St. John's
and
fans? Like,
obscene.
since when did St. John's fans
I don't
Alabama
know.
fans?
I don't know
Or
if that's where they're coming from. I'm sure some of I would imagine most of them are coming from
Betting.
gamblers.
betting, yeah.
To what do you ascribe? I was trying to think what makes this tournament so great that it's gotten the best, to your point, the best rating since 1993. Averaging 9.4 million viewers per game in the first 2 rounds.
A couple number ones, number twos with massive followings, including national followings. Florida being a 1 and being as good as they were as the season progressed, they have a huge national following. I think the news of the SEC and the record 14 teams got people's attention and wanted to see. Duke has a big following. I think people want to see Cooper Flagg play. There's no doubt about that. So, I think there are a few things, and I don't know what makes it so much better than past tournaments that people are wanting to tune in, but I think there are simply top teams rising to the top, and people want to see some of these great players. I can't really figure out anything else.
Yeah, sometimes it's as simple as that. It's Occam's razor, the most
Mm-hmm.
simple.
Wait, what? By the way, one of my favorite terms of all time, Occam's
I
razor.
know, that's why I
Love it.
through it out there.
Yeah,
And I
nice.
went back and
Oh,
looked
that's
in
right.
19.
I dropped that one time, didn't I?
Yes, yes.
Uh,
I was paying homage.
Might have been the first show. Sorry to interrupt because that was great.
No, but I went
Great
back and
use of it.
that 1993 tournament, which had the highest ratings up until this year, that was UNC beating the Fab Five, where Chris Webber called a non-existent timeout at the end
Mhm.
of the game. But that was another great tournament. We had Duke getting upset. Duke was the defending champion. They got upset in the second round by Cal with Jason Kidd and Lamont Murray. There was some great storylines there. 15 seed Santa Clara beat number 2 Arizona. That they were the Cinderella team that year. You know, that's what I was thinking back then. We had great teams. We had a defending champ that was expected to go back and win again. We had great matchup in the finals. Those guys, you know, to this day, I can probably name 4 out of the 5 Fab Five, right? You had Weber,
Jalen
you had
Rose.
Jalen Rose, Juwan Howard, Jimmy King, and why am I blanking on Jackson's first name? Anyway, we digress.
I did want to give a shout out to the women's side as well. And again, you called this one and said no expectation that it was going to duplicate the numbers from last year. And I don't think anyone thought that, but they're holding their own. And I think there's a bit of that rising tide that's carried over, averaging 367,000 viewers across the first round, which is well up over 23. So I'm not trying to make excuses for them that they should dip, but I think that if you use the 23 year as a benchmark and see that significant of an increase, while it's not the Caitlin Clark fueled, and I'll say that because I think that's a fair assessment, the Caitlin Clark fueled incredible numbers that we saw in last year's tournament, this is pretty solid.
They've done very well. And last year was a once in a generation type situation with Caitlin Clark. And there are great players, and if you don't mind, I'll take this opportunity. We can talk about the finalists that were just named for the Naismith Players and Coaches of the Year. So on the women's side, Lauren Betts at UCLA, Paige Beckers from Connecticut, Anna Hidalgo from Notre Dame. That's your girl.
Mm-hmm.
And Juju Watkins, who sadly blew out her ACL in the second round game, which USC went on to win. But that's going to obviously cause some concerns with Coach Lindsey Gottlieb out at USC. How do you replace somebody like that? You don't. Right, next woman up isn't going to be Juju Watkins, unfortunately.
I mean, obviously a great selection of talented players, and just for the reference, my Hannah was my pick for Naismith Player of the Year on the women's side. So
we'll see if that comes through. We'll be announcing it a week from today in Tampa, Florida. We'll be announcing the women's Player of the Year as well as the Coach of the Year, and Dawn Staley, who's going for her 5th win in 6 seasons as a finalist, along with Mark Campbell, who's done a tremendous job out at TCU, and Corey Close at UCLA. So
that was my pick. That was my pick for Coach of the Year. Just reminding everybody, because I am going to stand by my actions. And
okay, well, are you suggesting that I don't?
No.
Okay,
not at all. I was referencing something very different.
Okay.
As we talked about last year on the NCAA college side, led to this great burst in interest and activity around WNBA. We've had this great success story in NWSL. There are studies going out that have shown that the interest in advertising against women's sports has really increased 139% year over year from 2024, meaning over 2023. Big name categories, advertising categories, really driving that. So it obviously is a good time, I think, for brands to invest in women's sports beyond the traditional reason, because there are great storylines. And by traditional reasons, I mean the past reasons. The reasons that only for PR to be able to say you're doing the right things. There are legitimately great storylines to capitalize on. There are great content opportunities, and there are numbers that are backing up the reason why companies and brands should get involved in women's sports across the board.
Yeah, there is you will actually get a return on your investment. If you invest wisely in women's sports, you will get a return on your investment.
One other thing on that topic, I'll go ahead
Mhm.
and throw out that the IOC, for the first time ever, picked a female president to replace Thomas Bach. It's 𝘗𝘰𝘮𝘭𝘕, former Zimbabwe swimmer, and multiple firsts there. As I said, first time in the 130-year history of the IOC that a woman will sit as president. She's the youngest since Pierre de Coubertin,
Who was
you
the
know,
founder
who was
of the
the
modern
founder of the
Olympic
modern
Games.
Olympics.
And great pronunciation, by the way.
Not bad, huh? You know, I was okay on that side of it when I was forced to take French in high school and even in college. I couldn't like grade out of taking French classes in college. That was horrible.
Did you know that I'm taking French lessons now? Did I tell you that?
Really?
Yeah.
Good
I'm
for you.
taking them on Duolingo. Today was my 151st straight day.
That's impressive. I was trying to do French on Duolingo for a bit, and I was pretty steady with it because a lot of it was coming back to me. And then I'm like, I should learn Spanish. So I started trying to learn Spanish, and I haven't been as good. I will get back there on that.
I can't speak a word of French. At this point, I can read it pretty well, but I
All
can't
right,
speak it.
Good.
And I can speak Spanish a little bit. Un poco solamente.
I was going to try to say something, but I couldn't even come up with a retort of any kind. And also, first president to hail from Africa. So some big firsts there.
I think it's great. I saw a photo of her with Anita de France from the United States, who was, if not the first, one of the first women members of the IOC. So I look forward to the day where we no longer have to celebrate firsts like that. But it is big news, and it is worthy of recognizing. And I think what we may very well see over the next 20 years is the first Olympic Games on the African continent.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So congratulations to 𝘗𝘰𝘮𝘭𝘕. We will be watching this.
Yeah. So I have one more thing. Well, we can go back and if you want to finish the bracket, we can talk about the finalists on the men's side. You'd like to know who the final? You want to take a guess? Okay,
Oh.
who do you think the finalists?
Cooper Flag,
right?
Broom,
right? Those are two. You got 2 for 4. You want me to give you the other 2?
Yeah. Oh, it's only 4. All right.
Walter Clayton Jr. from Florida is a third finalist, and Braden Smith from Purdue. Those are your 4 finalists.
I have not watched Purdue this year, and I watched the game this weekend when I was out in Chicago with a Purdue grad and a big fan, and he could not stop talking about Smith, and he's special, man. That guy is as scrappy as they come, and he can score now.
No, there's 4 great finalists.
Yeah. Also,
I have cast my vote. By the next time we speak, I can tell you whether or not my votes prevailed. And men's, who do you think the finalists for Coach of the Year is on the men's side?
It's obviously going to be Shire from Duke.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Earl.
Got it. 2 for 2.
I would think. I would think. I don't know when the voting ended, but Golden from Florida, and Patino.
You got 3 out of 4.
Okay.
The one that you didn't get, it's not Golden. Kelvin Sampson. Yep.
Okay.
From Houston.
Yep.
So there is an embarrassment of riches on both men's and women's side for player and coach of the year. So
yeah.
I'm very curious to see who we, as I said, we'll be awarding the women's player coach of the year next Wednesday in Tampa, and then that Sunday of Final Four weekend we'll be recognizing the men's winners at Final Four in San Antonio. So I'm very excited to be going out for those events.
Cool.
Got time for one more thing before we take a break?
Cool.
I read today, and this was news to you. Andrew Luck, who is the general manager of Stanford football, fired Troy Taylor, the head coach. He said it was time for a change within the program. He didn't think Taylor was the man to take them to the next level. There were also some questions about Taylor's treatment of women on his staff, all of which led to Andrew Luck firing him. within the last day or two. But I think the big story there is this an outlier, or will this be the start of a trend on who has the decision-making capability for hiring and firing coaches?
Well, what I'm curious about is whether Andrew Luck went into that role knowing it was going to be his responsibility. I imagine he had to, right? That he was going to come in and perhaps make the final determination on that. But this is obviously traditionally the role of the athletic director in college athletics. Now, the big-time programs are moving to this general manager model, much more similar to the pros. I almost feel weird even saying the pros when comparing it to college sports, because we're pretty much at that point where it's all pro sports or styled after pro sports. We also talked a week or so ago about Steph Curry taking the assistant GM role at Davidson, which is more perfect because it probably is just an outreach to recruits and so forth there. But clearly Andrew Luck has stepped into this and has got the hiring and firing duty. So what does it mean, to your point? It seems as though at some of these programs that AD job will be maybe one that manages the overall department budget, probably handles fundraising, because those GMs are going to be wanting to spend money, and they're going to be very much involved in the NIL fundraising, which will move into the schools or under the direction of the universities themselves, rather these shady collectives that are out there. And it honestly, when you mentioned this to me before we came on air, it blew me away. And I guess that's where we are, and we're going to have to see what's happening and whether this is going to mean quicker triggers for firing of coaches. I mean, there have been a few moves that have teams that on the basketball side that performed really well within the last year or so that are just getting axed really fast. So, yeah, it's going to be a fascinating thing to follow. But, I think these people that come in were former players that clearly have an eye for talent and understand it. They're probably in good position to make these determinations. At the same time, they weren't management people. They didn't come in with that experience of hiring and firing, I don't think. Andrew Luck's a bright guy, clearly, but
Firing is the easier of the two, hiring and firing.
yeah.
But not only has that role historically gone to the athletic director, but in the case of big time coaches, typically football and basketball, but sometimes in other sports as well, it even gets the involvement of the university president, because it has ramifications beyond just the playing field, to your point, things like fundraising, alumni relations, and the sort. So it will be very interesting to see if this is, as I said at the outset, if this is an outlier or the beginning of a trend.
Yeah, no doubt. Before we go to break, I actually do want to mention one other thing, only because they just had their final, the TGL Golf Series, which is the indoor project from Tomorrow Golf that's led by Tiger and Rory. And I have to say, I don't know if you've watched a little, but I do want to take this up, and I'm hoping that we can get somebody on here in the near future from TGL. But their product's pretty fun. And the only reason I really bring it up now, because like I said, we'll have to talk about it. I don't know if you caught the 𝘚𝘢𝘭𝘕 celebration after he sunk this pretty impressive putt to win the thing for the Atlanta team. Oh, by the way, just to loop back in, we'll kind of do a callback. Steve Cohen, who has an interest in the New York team and is an investor in there, he was on site at the final of this at SoFi Center, which is a Florida venue built specifically for this league. Anyway, Horschel wins the thing on this putt, and he has this great celebration. And the only thing I could think of when I saw it was the classic Pete Weber, "Who do you think you are? I am" celebration after his, I don't know if it was a perfect game or whatever, but it's like one of the most legendary, certainly the most legendary bowling celebration of all time. Maybe the most interesting. "You are, I am." Anyway, that's kind of what reminded me of when I saw this awesome celebration by Billy Horschel as he drained the putt to win it for the Atlanta team over New York.
I like TGL. I think it's fun.
Now, we're going to have to take this up again, not only because I had one of the predictions that, things would come together by the end of this year in golf, and there are negotiations. But I saw a quote from Webb Simpson, a Wake Forest golfer, just thought I'd mention that, that he's saying there's all kinds of gaps still left in trying to pull this together. And the big one is where does Live Golf fit? We've talked about it, that it's a team competition, but 14 team events aren't going to work in mixing up and having the guys come back and forth with the tour. TGL seems like a more logical type of team avenue for it. So who knows what's going to happen? But again, it's something we're going to have to discuss over subsequent episodes of Wait What.
Well, before we take a break, that actually spurred another thought on my mind.
We can go on forever.
Well, we don't have a guest today, so we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of timing. So you talked about the gaps in the conversations. This is a situation, and again, I'm not trying to be political here. This is a situation in which I don't think it makes sense for Trump to become too involved. I think he just muddies the waters, only because there's too many parties at play. Again, this is not a condemnation or indictment of Trump. It's simply an observation. But then that spurred a second thought, and you and I have been in the sponsorship world for many, many years. And I think we're very open to new assets and new inventory and new ways to sort of explore sponsorships. But something I saw the other day really rubbed me the wrong way, which was the announcement that the White House is seeking sponsors for the annual Easter egg roll that's held on the South Lawn every spring. I just find that incredibly distasteful as a sponsorship person. So I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things that you hit on there. I mean, personally, I do as well, because it's never been meant to be that. Obviously, the eggs are contributed or donated by, I believe, the Egg Council, but that's never really a visible component. I think it's PR'd around there, and it's an in-kind effort. And obviously, the Egg Council probably has things that they have to lobby the government for from time to time. So is that a sponsorship? Not in the traditional sense that we thought. But based on the reporting, there's actual solicitation of corporate brands. And based on other things we're seeing, obviously, that will come with something. And it looks like there will be brand visibility across the signage that's on site, possibly on the eggs themselves. We'll see. It's weird times, Tim. I mean, everything's a little bit different. But then back to your point about, where and how he gets involved in the coming back together, I guess, of PGA Tour and Live and PIF and the Strategic Sports Group that's invested in. Listen, he's a golf guy. His venues are a big part of Live. He's been a big part of Live. He's super tight with all the people on the Saudi side. He clearly is someone that could be there. The question is, should the President of the United States be getting involved in these sports things? But it's pretty obvious he wants to be, and he's known as a guy that loves golf. And the various parties, I don't know about Scott O'Neill on the Live side now, but Norman was close to him. Trump has been pretty dismissive of the PGA Tour of late because of his alignment with Live, but he clearly has relationships with all the people on the Saudi side that are involved with PIF, right up to the Crown Prince. So we'll have to see where that goes.
Did you see the video of the 𝘗𝘭𝘠𝘭 he hit?
I've seen it. Yeah.
And then he comes out that night, he won his club championship.
Well, I'm not here to
Come
defend
on.
that was an old video. That wasn't like from that tournament. But yes, the fact that he won another, I don't know how he not only plays, but plays in so many club championships. Yeah. A little dubious. On that one.
He's got a lot of free time.
All right. But as you like to say, we don't tend to talk politics on this show.
No,
other than
no.
A little mention here and there. All right. We're going to take a break and come right back. All right. Well, that was a fun and very winding discussion, Tim, in the first part of the show. But we are at that point of this episode where we take a little look forward rather than backwards and put some consideration into what we're looking forward to or keeping an eye on. So I'll turn that over to you and ask you what you're looking for.
So in addition to the Sweet 16 leading into the Final Four. I mean, I think that's a given. Couple of things I'm looking at. Um, One is there was a report today that ESPN may be going back into negotiations with Major League Baseball. I could envision a scenario in which ESPN gets a smaller package of games and some streaming services get more, but I'm keeping an eye on that as well. I wanted to give a shout out to former NBA player Matthew Dellavedova, who played at St. Mary's. He won a championship with the Cavaliers. He's now playing in the Australian top league, the NBL, and he won the finals MVP recently, and he actually called out his opponent 𝘗𝘁𝘎�ㄐ𝑚 as more deserving of the honor and gave the award to him. And I couldn't help but think that that was exactly the same move that Tony Manero used at 2001 when he won the dance competition with his partner over the Latino couple. And Tony believed that it was actually only because the judges were racist or xenophobic or prejudiced, whatever term you want to use. And he actually went over and gave them the award. So the winner of my Tony Manero Good Sportsman Award goes to Matthew Dellavedova.
We have to name that for sure. That's pretty amazing. That great reference there. Yeah, I think this is an unbelievable story, a great one. St. Mary's, Dellavedova is Australian, and they had a great pipeline over the years to Australian players, haven't they? St. Mary's.
Yes. What about you? What are you looking out for?
So a couple things. There's one shout out I wanted to give last week that I neglected to, and then we heard news of George Foreman's passing, the great heavyweight champion, who in later years became very well known for the George Foreman Grill. And the reason that it's interesting to mention these both together is that both of them were classic former athletes turned amazing entrepreneurs. Now, Junior Bridgman was an NBA player, never a big star, but he died at 71 a week and a half ago or so. He played 12 seasons in the NBA, mostly with the Bucks. But I think more importantly, as his post-playing days, he became a billionaire by investing in good things at good times, restaurant chains, et cetera. Became a part owner of the Bucks themselves. Like he was in Magic Johnson level class entrepreneur, and he got a lot of credit and a lot of great shout outs from league executives, et cetera, for what a model businessman and person he had been in his post-playing days. And I think Foreman fits that as well. He was known as an absolute, I guess, mean competitor, certainly very stoic competitor. His fight with Ali, where Ali brought out the rope-a-dope and surprised everyone and actually beat Foreman, was one of the most famous fights, of course, of all time. But in later years, he became kind of this friendly guy. He found religion and became a minister, named a lot of his kids George, which I thought was just hilarious, and became just a funny, affable pitchman. And so to his family and to Junior Bridgman's family, condolences. I also want to give a quick shout out to Andy Clark, who's a dear friend of mine, former colleague at DePaul, Fordham grad, runs the sport management program at DePaul. And I spoke at several of his classes, one of his undergrad classes and a graduate class recently. And he's doing a lot right there. I've been getting handwritten letters from a number of his students, and it's just been really nice and actually quite impressive to read. People talking about the podcast, people talking about various things I've said. I think Andy's doing a good job with these students, but also a credit to the students. I don't want to give it all to Andy for actually making that effort. And to those students that have reached out to me on LinkedIn with actually personalized notes, I very much appreciate that. I'll leave it at that. A couple shout outs. The other thing I do want to go back and mention is I think we're going to have to take this up again soon. This story with Dolan and the NBA and kind of what's happening there, I think is going to be a fascinating one to see. And, hey, I'm looking forward to the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight this weekend. So with that, I think we've come to an end. I think we can wrap it up. And we want to say thank you to you. Hearing from people about the show and what it is that we're doing. And just when people ask questions about it, it always really touches us and we appreciate it. So if you do like what you hear, engage with us in any way that you can, whether it's on LinkedIn or various other social channels. And then, of course, listen and like and subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple or any of the other podcast platforms that you might use. We really do love hearing from you, and we do very much appreciate you all listening. So with that, we'll bring it to a close. So until next time, I'm DP, he's McGee, and we will talk soon.